Welcome to the deep dive. We're so glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, really glad to have you here.
I want you to start off by picturing a scene. Imagine a firefighter standing just outside a burning building. They're in the full gear, the heavy insulated orange suit, the helmet, the breathing apparatus.
Right, the whole setup.
Exactly. And there's this heavy metal door right in front of them, and thick, dark smoke is just violently pushing out from the cracks. Inside, as we can see from the striking images in today's source material, it is an absolute inferno.
It's just terrifying.
Now, the movie instinct is to kick that door off its hinges and rush in to save the day, right? You want to be the hero who charges into the chaos. But real firefighters don't do that. They stop.
Yeah, they do.
They just stand there at the door, the middle of a crisis, and they pause.
It completely defies the human urge to jump into action. I mean, when lives are on the line, or even when it just feels like they are, our adrenaline screams at us to do something immediately.
And that pause is exactly what we are exploring today. We're diving into a really compelling document called What a DSL Can Learn from a Firefighter. For those who might not be familiar with the terminology, DSL stands for Designated Safeguarding Lead.
Right, so that's the person in a school or maybe a charity organization who holds the ultimate responsibility for child protection, vulnerable adult safety, crisis management, all of that.
The heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And the mission for us today is to figure out how leaders can manage these incredibly high-stakes, sensitive, and emotionally charged situations without, well, accidentally pouring gasoline on the fire.
Which happens more often than you'd think.
Yeah, unfortunately. We want to equip you with the tools to navigate a crisis safely, whether you're a formal DSL or just managing people in a complex environment.
And what's fascinating here is the specific reason the firefighter pauses at that door. It's critical. They are not hesitating out of fear or, indecision. They are executing a highly technical skill called reading the building.
Reading the bill.
Yeah, so before they ever reach for the door handle, they are analyzing the color and the density of the smoke. They're feeling the amount of heat radiating off the metal.
Oh, wow. So they're physically touching the door.
Right. They're watching how the air flows into the building, looking at the structural signs of the walls themselves. They're gathering an immense amount of environmental data in just a matter of seconds.
And the authors of this document translate that directly into the golden rule for a designated safeguarding lead, which is that action must be informed by context, never driven by impulse.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because understanding the environment is step one. But the source material spends a lot of time warning about the opposite scenario. Like, what happens when a leader skips that crucial pause because they assume they already know what's going on?
That is the danger of overconfidence.
Right. The document points out that in firefighting, assuming control of the situation too quickly is actually one of the greatest occupational hazards, and the parallel in safeguarding is striking.
It really is.
If someone comes to you with a problem, there is this massive, heavy pressure to instantly fix it. Your brain immediately goes into problem-solving mode.
And that pressure comes from all sides, too. It's a very natural response for people in caring professions, obviously, but it's also external. You have concerned parents, anxious colleagues, senior management demanding to know what you are doing about a situation right now.
Everybody wants an answer yesterday.
Exactly. But yielding to that pressure to act immediately often leads to premature conclusions. You might hear one initial report from a teacher about a student acting out and think, well, I understand the entire dynamic.
Right, you think you've got the whole picture.
But if you intervene based solely on that incomplete picture without consulting other staff members or checking the student's history or just gathering all available information, you risk making the situation significantly worse.
But wait, I have to push back a little bit here on this idea of pausing, because it feels a bit disconnected from the reality of leadership. Isn't a bias for action a necessary trait for someone in charge? Like, if you are the designated safeguarding lead, you are the person responsible for safety. If a student or an employee is in trouble, I would think people want a leader who trusts their gut, makes a call, and jumps into action.
I hear that.
Sitting around analyzing metaphorical smoke colors while a crisis unfolds sounds like a great way to get accused of negligence.
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario for a leader, absolutely. You are caught between the demand for an immediate fix and the danger of acting blindly. But the source material draws a really hard line here. Acting with uncalibrated confidence is not leadership, it's a liability.
A liability? How so?
Let's say a DSL challenges a vulnerable individual too directly about a sensitive issue, maybe suspected abuse or a hidden mental health struggle, without having the full context of their home life.
Right.
That isn't decisive leadership. That is an inappropriate, reckless intervention. It puts the individual entirely on the defensive, it shatters any existing trust, and it instantly escalates the tension.
Oh, yeah.
Truly effective decisions come from trained awareness and recognizing historical patterns, not from throwing your weight around to prove you're in charge.
That distinction makes a lot of sense when you frame it as the difference between being reactive and being responsive. A reaction is a reflex.
Yeah.
A response is a strategy,
That's a great way to put it.
which leads us to the physical consequences of being reactive. Because the source uses a terrifying phenomenon to explain how blind confidence can actively weaponize a problem rather than solve it. We need to talk about the backdraft.
Oh, the backdraft is one of the most volatile concepts in the whole document.
It's incredibly vivid. The physics of it are just wild. So a backdraft happens when a fire has been burning in a tightly confined space. Because it's closed off, the fire consumes almost all the available oxygen.
Right, it starves itself.
Exactly. The visible flames actually die down. It looks like the fire is going out. But the heat, this intense superheated combustible gas, remains trapped in the room, just waiting.
And then an overconfident firefighter comes along.
And kicks open the door. Suddenly, a massive rush of fresh oxygen hits those superheated gases, and the result is an instantaneous, violent explosion. Everything ignites at once, blowing the room apart.
When the authors translate that into the world of safeguarding, the parallel is chilling. A safeguarding backdraft happens when sensitive, deeply hidden issues are exposed too aggressively or too quickly.
It's that premature exposure.
Imagine a situation that has been simmering beneath the surface for months. Maybe it's a complex, highly abusive family dynamic or an employee dealing with severe, undisclosed substance trauma.
So it's a powder keg, basically.
It is incredibly volatile, but for the moment, it is contained. The person is holding it together. If a DSL rushes in, bypasses the slow work of building trust, and forces a confrontation or mishandles the initial disclosure, they're doing the exact same thing as that reckless firefighter.
They're throwing open the door.
They are throwing open the door and introducing oxygen to a superheated environment.
So the intervention itself is the oxygen. The leader trying to fix the problem is the very thing that causes the explosion.
Exactly that. And this raises an important question, right? How do we handle risks that aren't visible? We tend to think of risks as obvious dangers, someone holding a weapon, or someone actively self-harming.
The visible flames.
Right. But latent risks are hazards that are currently dormant. They aren't visible, but they are highly reactive to the wrong stimulus.
But how do you even know a risk is latent if it's not visible?
You assume it's there until proven otherwise.
Wow.
That is the essence of informed caution. If you use accusatory language, or if you force a delicate conversation to happen on your timeline rather than the victim's timeline, you become the trigger.
So they might shut down completely?
The person might completely withdraw and refuse all future help, or the situation might suddenly escalate into immediate physical danger because an abuser was alerted prematurely.
That is terrifying.
It is. Navigating these situations requires an extreme level of care with language, tone, and pacing to keep that backdraft from blowing up in everyone's face.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If rushing in to fix it can literally cause a metaphorical explosion, what are you supposed to do when a situation is simply too dangerous to handle? Because clearly, you can't just ignore a fire.
No, ignoring it isn't an option, but changing your tactical approach is. The text points out a crucial maneuver that firefighters use. They don't just assess the fire itself.
What else are they looking at?
They are constantly monitoring the structural integrity of the building, the safety thresholds of their own team, and the limits of their equipment. And sometimes, their tactical move is to completely withdraw, to pull back.
That feels so counterintuitive to the hero narrative. Like we expect them to fight until the bitter end.
They recognize a hard truth, though. Continuing to push forward when the conditions have surpassed, your capacity doesn't save the building. It just kills the firefighters. Reassessing and retreating actually decreases the overall risk.
There's a really fascinating analogy to be made here about how we handle crises in our own workplaces or schools. We all have this deeply ingrained corporate belief that we have to resolve every single crisis by the end of the day.
Oh, the Friday afternoon rush.
Yes. It's like we want to leave the office on a Friday with a completely clean inbox and every interpersonal fire totally extinguished. We view an unresolved problem as a personal failure.
We really do.
But sometimes a fire just needs to be contained. You don't have to put it out instantly. You just have to keep it from spreading to the rest of the building.
And the text provides a very direct translation for the DSL here regarding capacity. Safeguarding is rarely about immediate, tidy resolutions. It's usually about safe, ongoing management over a long period.
So you're playing the long game.
Yeah. A complex situation might require what the authors call a phased intervention. It might involve a strategy that spans weeks, months, or even years of careful monitoring.
Which requires leaders to develop a tolerance for sitting with the discomfort of things being unresolved. That is tough.
It is incredibly tough. And more importantly, it requires checking your own ego. Recognizing the limits of your own professional capacity and ensuring the safety of your staff is paramount.
Right.
Sometimes the absolute bravest, most professional decision a DSL can make is to admit they are out of their depth and seek external support.
Passing the baton.
Exactly. It's recognizing that a situation involves criminality or severe psychiatric risk and officially handing it over to the police, social services, or medical professionals. Stepping back from unsafe engagement isn't a failure of leadership. It is a highly strategic, protective decision.
If the structural integrity of a child's situation is collapsing into areas of severe trauma, a school counselor shouldn't try to play detective or psychologist. You pull your staff back, you establish a perimeter of support, and you call in the heavy machinery.
Right. You prioritize long-term safety over the immediate urge to be the hero.
That structural failure is the real danger. Because if you send untrained staff deeper into a volatile crisis, you are just creating new victims.
Absolutely. You're adding casualties.
Now, as vivid and helpful as this firefighter analogy is for framing our mindset, the authors of the source material are very careful to point out where the metaphor breaks down. Because, let's be honest, human psychology is infinitely more complicated than combustible material.
Yes, very much so.
The document actually includes a section titled The Honest Bit, where it outlines what leaders must strictly not take from the firefighting world.
And the most glaring difference the authors point out is the visibility of the threat. In a physical fire, you have undeniable visual cues. Smoke is obvious, flames are obvious, the hazard is tangible and right in front of you.
You can literally point at it.
Exactly. But emotional distress, abuse, social risk, those things rarely come with billowing black smoke. In fact, they are actively concealed by the people involved. Safeguarding deals with risks that are gradual, deliberately hidden, and deeply internal.
Which means the quietest, most compliant student in a classroom might actually be the burning building, while the student who is shouting and throwing chairs might just be dealing with a minor frustration.
You're hitting on the core tension right there. It completely changes the nature of the response.
How so?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a firefighter uses a purely tactical framework to neutralize an immediate physical danger. They don't have to build a relationship with the fire to put it out.
No, you just douse it.
Right. But a DSL has to utilize a relational and contextual framework. You are dealing with incredibly subtle behavioral signals.
You can't just spray a fire hose of policy at a complex human problem and expect it to go out.
The complexity of human emotion means that safeguarding can never be purely reactive. If you wait for the alarm bell to ring, you've already failed.
It's too late by then.
Exactly. You have to proactively look for those subtle, easily missed signals. And that requires a deep level of relational trust and contextual understanding of the individual, which is far harder to achieve than simply arriving at a scene and assessing physical damage.
And that brings us to a massive logistical challenge. This level of proactive, nuanced observation can't just rely on one really well-trained DSL making all the right moves. If a school has 2,000 students, one leader cannot possibly read the subtle behavioral cues of every single child.
It's physically impossible.
Right. Understanding these hidden signals requires more than individual discipline. It requires an entire system built around this concept. So what does this all mean for the organization? How does the document suggest an organization actually build this informed caution into its very DNA?
Well, the source text transitions from individual tactics to organizational design by focusing on the leadership layer. It outlines what it calls a risk-aware safeguarding culture.
Okay, risk-aware safeguarding culture.
Yeah. And to move beyond the jargon, the authors break this down into 3 core pillars that have to be applied to pastoral systems and broader organizational management.
Let's break down those 3 pillars because corporate frameworks can sometimes feel a bit abstract. I want to know what these actually look like in practice on like a Tuesday morning. What is the first pillar?
The first pillar is foundations. This sounds basic, but it's about formally prioritizing safety and care above all other metrics. It means establishing an organizational baseline where every response is guaranteed to be safe and considered before it is fast or decisive.
So if we use the analogy, it's establishing a strict, non-negotiable rule that nobody's allowed to kick a door down. What does a door kick look like in real life, though?
In a school setting, a door kick is a principal suspending a student for aggressive behavior immediately without ever asking why they acted out or checking their safeguarding file.
Oh, just pure reaction.
Right. In a corporate setting, it's HR calling a sudden confrontational meeting based on a single anonymous complaint without doing quiet background fact-finding first. The foundation pillar ensures those impulsive actions are culturally unacceptable.
Okay, that makes sense. You build a foundation where the pause is mandatory. What is the second pillar?
The second pillar is developmental pathways. The text uses a great term for this, actually building well-being literacy.
Well-being literacy. That implies that understanding human distress is a language you have to learn and become fluent in, like reading or writing. It's not just an instinct.
That is the exact implication. It means training every single staff member, not just the designated leads or counselors, to become literate in recognizing those subtle behavioral signals.
Getting everyone on board.
Right. It's ensuring that It's training a math teacher to recognize when a drop in homework quality isn't laziness, but a sign of neglect at home.
Wow, that's incredibly comprehensive.
It's giving the entire staff the vocabulary to spot the faint smoke, and then ensuring the system is set up to match the intervention to the specific need of the individual, rather than using a one-size-fits-all punishment.
So the entire staff becomes the smoke detectors. That is a huge cultural shift. Which brings us to the third pillar. How do we hold all of that together?
The third pillar is leadership, but specifically it focuses on professional judgment, balanced decision-making, and what the authors call reflective safeguarding practice.
Let me stop you there, because reflective practice sounds a lot like the kind of corporate speak that ends up just being a boring mandatory meeting. What does that actually mean in the trenches? Is it just a post-mortem after a crisis?
No, it's much more rigorous than a standard postmortem. Reflective practice means actively deconstructing your near misses.
Misses.
Yeah. It's a leadership team sitting down and looking at a recent intervention and asking brutal questions like, did we move too fast here? Did our tone escalate the parent's anger? Did we almost cause a backdraft?
I see.
Experience alone doesn't build better judgment. Reflecting honestly on that experience does. Veteran firefighters know exactly when to hold back because they've studied the patterns of past fires. Leaders have to foster that same culture of vulnerability and analysis in their teams, where staff are encouraged to admit when they almost got it wrong.
Which requires an immense amount of psychological safety among the staff. You can't have reflective practice if people are terrified of being fired for admitting a mistake.
Exactly.
And that leads to what the document presents as the ultimate system-level question. It's a profound culture check for any organization. It asks leaders to look in the mirror and ask, are our safeguarding responses measured and informed? Or do our systems inadvertently reward overconfidence and risk-escalating situations?
It forces you to look at who gets promoted and who gets praised.
Yes.
If your system constantly praises the hero who aggressively resolves complex human issues by 5 p.m. without asking deeper questions, you are actively building a culture of overconfidence. You are manufacturing your own backdrafts.
It's a complete paradigm shift. Instead of praising the person who rushes in and forces a resolution, you praise the professional who pauses, assesses the complexity, and says, we need to take this slowly, and we might need outside help.
That is the mark of true expertise in safeguarding. It isn't about knowing all the answers immediately. It's about knowing how to safely find them.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's pull together the vital takeaways we want you to carry with you from this firefighter analogy. First and foremost, whatever crisis you are facing, do not rush in blindly. Suppress that urge to be the immediate hero.
It's so hard, but so important.
Take that crucial moment to pause at the door. Read the environment, look for the subtle signs of distress, and deeply respect the hidden, latent risks that you might not be able to see yet.
And remember that stepping back is often the most protective, strategic action you can take. Containing a situation, seeking external support from specialists, or managing a crisis slowly over several months isn't a failure of leadership.
Not at all.
Safeguarding demands incredible discipline. It cannot be reactive. It must be measured, deeply aware of context, and always prioritizing long-term safety over short-term resolution.
Even when every single instinct and every person around you is screaming at you to speed up,
Yeah.
it all comes back to that core philosophy of informed caution.
The text leaves us with a brilliant final reflection, and it is something that applies far beyond formal safeguarding roles. Whether you are managing an employee in crisis at work, navigating a highly charged dynamic in your community, or dealing with a volatile situation in your own extended family, I want you to ask yourself this question.
What's the question?
Am I responding to this situation with a frantic sense of urgency, or with the kind of informed caution that actually prevents an explosion?
What a powerful lens to view our own decision-making through. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you take this concept of informed caution and apply it to whatever metaphorical fires you might be facing in your own week. Remember, when you finally get to that heavy metal door and the pressure is building, just pause. Read the building. We'll see you next time.